If you have your Bibles, you might turn to Deuteronomy chapter 4. Deuteronomy 4, and we will look there this morning. It's so good to see you, and we have a good number here this morning. We're almost back, I think, to full strength and full attendance, even inside the building. Over the last couple of weeks, I've been really encouraged by the number who've been here, and we've had visitors lately, and that's an encouraging thing too. Glad that you're here, and glad that we have this time to spend in a study of God's Word. And seems like everybody's in good spirits and everybody's singing out. And if you're not in good spirits, I hope that the singing is encouraging you and that we can encourage one another as we study together this morning. So over the last couple of weeks, when I've had opportunities to speak, I've been talking about lessons from Deuteronomy chapter 4 through chapter 11. And I chose this section of text because I was thinking about this section as fundamentals of faithfulness, as things that I think provide foundations for thinking about why we obey God, what it looks like to obey God. And what I want to focus in on this morning are some dangers that are presented, some things that might challenge our faithfulness to God. So if you'll remember, the first part of our series in Deuteronomy looked at several passages and said that really the book of Deuteronomy and these chapters especially, and really the whole Bible, is a story of what God has done for us, who He is, what He has accomplished for us, what we should do in response to that, and then what God will do on the other side of that. Whether we obey Him or if we disobey Him, how God will respond to our response to Him. And so we looked at, for example, Deuteronomy chapter 6, and that passage where the son comes and asks his father, why do we do all of this? And the father tells the story of the redemption from Egypt and the salvation and the deliverance and bringing them into the land. And he says, the Lord commanded us to do these things for our good always. And so we looked at passages like that. And then we looked at some of the specific injunctions, the specific commands that Moses gave to the people to hear what God had to say and to fear Him and to love Him and to serve Him. We looked at what those words mean and tried to think about how we can apply them to our new covenant era. And just like those fundamentals of faithfulness, those fundamental commands of hearing and fearing and loving and serving applied to the Old Testament people, they apply to us as well. Really, I think they've applied to people in every age. What God wanted from Adam and Eve was to hear and fear and love and serve. And what He wanted from Abraham was for Abraham to hear and fear and love and serve and hold fast. And what He wanted from Israel and what He wants from us and what He wants from people in every age are the same fundamental things. And I think for that reason, the dangers are the same. At least they're very similar. The threats to faithfulness are the same. And in Deuteronomy chapter 4, really there are 4 dangers that I want to look at over today and the next time I speak. There's 2 major ones and then 2 I think that kind of go with each one of those. So we'll look at 2 this morning and 2 next time. But in Deuteronomy chapter 4, Moses has described the wonderful privilege that they have had of hearing God speak to them. If you go back and look at the beginning of the chapter, he says, what nation has there ever been that has had the privilege of God speaking to them like this? And that if they would follow these instructions and if they would keep these commandments, then all the nations would look at them and they would say, that nation has something special. That nation has a God that we don't have because He gave them just and righteous commandments. And God says in Deuteronomy chapter 4 and verse 15, take ye therefore good heed unto yourselves, for ye saw no manner of similitude on the day that the Lord spake unto you in Horeb out of the midst of the fire. Lest you corrupt yourselves and make you a graven image, the similitude of any figure, the likeness of male or female, the likeness of any beast that is on the earth, the likeness of any winged fowl that flieth in the air, the likeness of anything that creepeth on the ground, the likeness of any fish that is in the water beneath them. And lest thou lift up thine eyes unto heaven, and when thou seest the sun and the moon and the stars, even all the hosts of heaven, shouldest be driven to worship them, and serve them which the Lord thy God hath divided unto all nations under the whole of heaven. But the Lord hath taken you, and brought you forth out of the iron furnace, even out of Egypt, to be unto Him a people of inheritance, as you are this day. Furthermore, the Lord was angry with me for your sakes, and sware that I should not go over Jordan, and that I should not go into the good land which the Lord thy God hath given thee for an inheritance. But I must die in this land, I must not go over Jordan, but ye shall go over and possess that good land. Take heed unto yourselves, lest ye forget the covenant of the Lord your God, which He made with you, and make you a graven image, the likeness of anything which the Lord thy God hath forbidden thee. For the Lord thy God is a consuming fire, even a jealous God. In Deuteronomy chapter 4, beginning at verse 15, Moses warns the people about the danger of idolatry. And he tells them that when God appeared to them, in verse 15, that they didn't see any form, they didn't see any likeness of God, that He did not appear to them in any kind of form. What happened is God spoke to them. He didn't show Himself to them in the sense of giving them a physical form to look at, but He spoke to them. And so as a result of that, they were not to make any form to worship. They were not to make male or female images to bow down to and worship. They were not to make animal images. To do so would invert the creation order. Think about what God did in Genesis chapter 1 when He made man and woman. And notice the text there says, in His image and in His likeness. And the words there are the same as the word for image and likeness in this text. Whenever you see image or likeness in this text, they're the same words as what God made man and woman. So how ridiculous it would be for human beings to go and make an image or a likeness of themselves when they are already in God's image and likeness. They are the ones who are supposed to be reflecting God. They are supposed to be representing Him, not some concrete or wooden statue or whatever. And in addition to that, you think about the idea that in Genesis 1, 26 and 27, God gave man and woman dominion over the rest of creation. That they were to subject creation to themselves, that they were to rule over it. And so how silly it would be if they were to take an animal that they are supposed to have the rule over, make an image of it, and then worship that. Now things are all out of whack. Now you have the animal dictating to the human, who's now left God completely out of the picture. And to do so, to do any of that, to make a human image or to make an animal image, would be, Paul says in Romans chapter 1, to give the glory to the creature rather than the Creator. That's really maybe the fundamental problem about idolatry, is that what happens is we take something that has been made and we give it the honor, the glory, and the devotion that is due to the one who made all of that stuff. Romans chapter 1 and verse 21, because that when they knew God, they glorified Him not as God, neither were they thankful, but became vain in their imaginations, and their foolish heart was darkened. Professing themselves to be wise, they became fools, and changed the glory of the incorruptible God into an image made like the corruptible man and to birds, and to four-footed beasts, and to creeping things. So think about what's happened. They've taken the infinite, eternal, incorruptible God, and they have exchanged Him for something that on its best day is not going to live but for, how long does an animal live? They have far shorter lifespan than humans, most of them. And so these corruptible, weak, fallen things, they were not to worship the sun or the moon or the stars, which incredibly has been an attraction of people in every civilization, it seems. Whether you look at the ancient Americas or the ancient Middle East or the ancient Far East, they all have a sun god, just about. Or they all have a moon god. Or the stars represent to them some of the deities. Those things had been made by God for humanity's benefit. Notice that the text even here says that He had divided them out for humans. The idea is not that they have a different sun or moon or stars, but that they're to be shared and used among all the different nations, but not worshipped. And that may very well be part of the emphasis of Genesis chapter 1. Why tell this story about God making man and animals and the sun and the moon and the stars? Well, because they need to know that these things are subjected to the God who made them. They're not gods themselves. They are made by God. Now, I think that this instruction is a fundamental instruction. When you think about the Ten Commandments, right at the very beginning, we have the instructions in Deuteronomy chapter 5 and verse 7, "Thou shalt have no other gods before me." And the idea there of no other gods before me is not just don't have them in my presence, right? You don't, or not have any in front of me, right? But don't have them in my presence. Don't have them anywhere near me because they don't compare. In verse 8, thou shalt not make thee any graven image or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the waters beneath the earth. Thou shalt not bow thyself down unto them, nor serve them. For I, the Lord thy God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children unto the third and fourth generation of them that hate me. Now notice that every time when we look at Sinai and Horeb, when God spoke to them, that the emphasis is on the words, not the form. So in Deuteronomy 4 and verse 12, just before where we picked up in our text, and the Lord spake unto you out in the midst of the fire, you heard the voice of the words, but saw no form. The King James says similitude. You saw no image there. Only you heard a voice. That's the emphasis. Back over in chapter 4 and verse 15. For you saw no manner of form on the day that the Lord spake unto you in Horeb out of the midst of the fire. Over in chapter 5 and verse 4, the Lord talked with you face to face in the mount out of the midst of the fire. And you may say, well, how did He speak to them face to face if He keeps emphasizing that they saw no form? It's the idea that He spoke to them personally. He spoke to them directly, without any gap in between, no intermediary in between. And so the emphasis on the connection here, the emphasis on the relationship is on what God said, not on what God looked like. The Lord, Yahweh, is the speaking God. He is the God who has spoken. And they, in order to know Him, in order to serve Him, they have to listen to Him. It's not about seeing Him. It's about listening to Him. And if they were to take the speaking God and make a marble statue, you know what marble statues do? Nothing. Right? They're just there. They don't speak. They're mute. And how convenient it is if we're going to make an idol that they don't speak. See, that's the threat of idolatry. It allows us to feel like we are worshiping what we ought to be worshiping, when in reality what God wants us to be doing is listening to Him. And an idol can't speak. God had forbidden these things, the text says, because He was a consuming fire, a jealous God. In verse 20 it says that He had brought them out of the iron furnace of Egyptian slavery. What a shame it would be for them to be rescued out of the iron furnace just to jump into the consuming fire. And so, He says, God is jealous. He had the right to their exclusive devotion. He was the one who had rescued them. They had made a covenant with Him. And His love is the jealousy of a husband for his wife, protective of that which belongs to him. And that is a perfectly appropriate emotion. Now, our problem with jealousy sometimes is that we're protective of things that don't belong to us. And we want them to be ours. But those things that belong to us, and rightfully, especially by covenant, it is right to be jealous over. So you can see this word being used, and you don't have to turn over there if you don't want to, but in the Song of Solomon, I don't get a chance to reference Song of Solomon very much, so take advantage of these opportunities. In Song of Solomon, chapter 8 and verse 6, one of the lovers speaks there, and he says, set me as a seal on thine heart, as a seal upon thine arm, for love is strong as death. Jealousy is cruel as the grave, the coals thereof are the coals of fire, which hath a most vehement flame. The idea is that jealousy that love creates for a husband for his wife, it burns, and it's intense. And I would say it is appropriate. Now, his jealousy, let me make this case with you. His jealousy is for our good. His jealousy is for our good. And you could say, how could that be the case? How could somebody being jealous be for our good? Well, first of all, Moses explains, this is back in Deuteronomy 4, verse 25, that the other gods are powerless. They're impotent. Deuteronomy 4, verse 25. When thou shalt beget children, and children's children, and ye shall have remained long in the land, and shall corrupt yourselves, and make a graven image, or the likeness of anything, and shall do evil in the sight of the Lord thy God, to provoke Him to anger, I call heaven and earth to witness against you this day, that you shall soon utterly perish from off the land whereunto you go over the Jordan to possess it. You shall not prolong your days upon it, but shall be utterly destroyed. And the Lord shall scatter you among the nations, and you shall be few left in number among the heathen, whither the Lord shall lead you. And there you shall serve gods, the work of men's hands, wood and stone, which neither see, nor hear, nor eat, nor smell. But if from thence thou shalt seek the Lord thy God, thou shalt find him, if thou seek him with all thy heart and with all thy soul. When thou art in tribulation, and all these things are come upon thee, even in the latter days, if thou turn to the Lord thy God, and shall be obedient unto his voice. For the Lord thy God is a merciful God. He will not forsake thee, neither destroy thee, nor forget the covenant of thy fathers, which he sware unto them. So I want you to see the first point here, is that the other gods are nothing. They're impotent, they're powerless. They can't see, they can't hear, they can't smell, they can't taste, nothing. And notice that they turn and they go and they serve these other gods. What power did they have to deliver them when he decided to bring his judgment on them? None. They could not deliver. They could not rescue. They would turn away and they would serve these other gods and they would end up in Babylonian captivity because they couldn't deliver. They couldn't save. God's jealousy was fiercely protective of them because the other gods had nothing to offer. They had no power to deliver. 1 Samuel chapter 12 and verse 21, Samuel is giving what we've called sometimes his farewell address. And he says to the people, he knows the danger that is facing them of turning to idolatry. They had before and they would again. And he says, do not turn away to vain things which profit nothing. Don't turn away to nothings that are nothing. But they would do it. In Psalm 115, the psalmist takes this idea, maybe reflecting on Deuteronomy 4, perhaps, and thinking about the impotence of the gods of the other nations. Not unto us, O Lord, not unto us, but unto thy name give glory, for thy mercy and for thy truth's sake. Wherefore should the heathen say, where is now their God? But our God is in the heavens. He hath done whatsoever he pleased. The idols are silver and gold, the work of men's hands. They have mouths, but they speak not. Eyes they have, but they see not. They have ears, but they hear not. Noses have they, but they smell not. They have hands, but they handle not. Feet have they, but they walk not. Neither speak they through their throat. They that make them are like unto them. So is everyone that trusteth them. O Israel, trust thou in the Lord. He is their help and their shield. O house of Aaron, trust in the Lord. He is their help and their shield. So the point here is that God is jealous for them because if they turn away from Him, they are turning away from the only thing that is a real refuge, the only real protection. And they're turning to gods that have mouths but can't speak and eyes but can't see. They're powerless. So the first thing is that the other suitors that would try to draw them away from the Lord had nothing to offer them. But second, the Lord loved them. And He had the power to rescue them. His jealousy was not self-interested, it was them interested. Notice that even when they had rejected Him, I love this in Deuteronomy 4. Even when they turn away and they go and serve other gods and God judges them for that, they're going to go into other nations and they're going to serve the works of men's hands. And God says, but even there, if you will turn to me and seek me, you will find me. And if you will listen to me and if you will obey me, then I will rescue you because I am merciful to you. God is jealous for them because He loves them. God wanted to be found by them. He is merciful. He remembers even when they abandoned and forgot, He would not abandon or forget. And He kept that promise. Over in Nehemiah chapter 9, this is a passage where Nehemiah is confessing the sins of the people and reflecting on the errors that they had made and praising God for His faithfulness to them even in the face of all that. Nehemiah chapter 9, looking down at verse 30, Nehemiah says, yet many years didst thou forbear them, and testified against them by thy spirit and thy prophets, but they would not give ear. Therefore you gave them into the hand of the people of the lands. Nevertheless, man, when you read a passage and it talks about all the bad things that happened to the people, and then you read nevertheless, there's hope. For thy great mercy's sake, you did not utterly consume them nor forsake them, for thou art a gracious and merciful God. Even when they wouldn't listen to the prophets, even when they turned away, nevertheless, you didn't forget about them, because you are merciful and gracious, and you rescued them. His jealousy was for their good. The other options had no power to deliver, but not only did He have the power to deliver them, He had the mercy and the desire to do so. What a blessing for a God like that to be jealous of us. How sad, then, that they did, in fact, turn away from God for idols. It didn't take long either. If you look at Judges chapter 2, really one generation after the people that Moses is speaking to, one generation. These people's children. In Judges chapter 2 and verse 11, we read the sad testimony of the writer. And the children of Israel did evil in the sight of the Lord and served Baal. And they forsook the Lord, the God of their fathers, which brought them out of the land of Egypt, and followed other gods of the gods of the people that were round about them, and bowed themselves unto them and provoked the Lord to anger. Just think about the way that the writer here is writing in Judges. They turned away from the Lord who delivered them. And who did they turn to? They turned to the gods of the people that couldn't deliver the people. Right? The Israelites have come in and conquered the land. These gods couldn't even deliver them. And Israel knew that their God could deliver because He had already done it. And yet they turn away anyway. And they forsook the Lord and served Baal and Ashtoreth. And the anger of the Lord was hot against Israel, and He delivered them into the hands of the spoilers that spoiled them, and He sold them into the hands of their enemies round about, so that they could no longer stand before their enemies. Whithersoever they went out, the hand of the Lord was against them for evil, as the Lord had sworn, and as the Lord had sworn unto them, and they were greatly distressed. Jeremiah, near the end of the period of Judah alone, but near the end of the kingdom period in general, Jeremiah will talk about them going off into idolatry. So this is Jeremiah chapter 2 and verse 9. Jeremiah says, Wherefore I will yet plead with you, saith the Lord, and with your children's children I will plead. For pass over the isles of Kittim and see, and send unto Kedar and consider diligently, and see if there be such a thing. Just go around and ask and see if anything like this has ever happened. Verse 11. Hath a nation changed their gods, which are yet no gods? Have they ever switched out the true and living God for gods that are not even God at all? But my people have changed their glory for that which doth not profit. The thing that made them special was that I was their God. I was their glory. I was what made them special. But they've exchanged me for something that doesn't have any value, does not profit. Be astonished, O ye heavens, at this, and be horribly afraid. Be ye very desolate, saith the Lord. For my people have committed two evils. They have forsaken me, the fountain of living waters, and have hewed them out cisterns, broken cisterns that can hold no water. So here you have, imagine this picture. Here you have a spring that is providing fresh water every day. And you say, no thanks. I'm going to dig a cistern over here. I'm going to hew me out a cistern. And it's broken and has holes and fractures in it and won't even hold water. And you say, no, I'm going to choose those instead of drinking this pure, fresh spring water. You'd say, those people are idiots. They were. They forsook the one thing that could provide them real, genuine, true life. And they turned to all these gods who couldn't even deliver what they promised to deliver. They turned away from God in pursuit of fertility, and the fertility gods couldn't do anything. You know why? Because they're not real. And they turned away from God in pursuit of the gods of war, and the gods of war couldn't deliver them because they're not real. And so they forsook the one person, the one being that could really give them what they needed for broken cisterns, buckets that couldn't even hold water. Sadder still that we turn to idols. We put our trust in things that do not profit. Ultimately, they do not profit. And certainly cannot deliver beauty, power, success, popularity, comfort, money, ball. We may not kneel in front of a statue, but we sure do give ourselves as living sacrifices. You know, the problem for idolatry always, fundamentally, was the idol of the heart. The idol that they built out of wood or stone or whatever was a reflection of an idolatry that was already going on the inside. You see this in the book of Ezekiel in chapter 14 and verse 3. I'm sure they were building actual idols too, but in chapter 14 verse 3, the Lord says to Ezekiel, "Son of man, these men have set up idols in their heart and put the stumbling block of their iniquity before their face. Should I be inquired of at all by them?" And then in Colossians chapter 3 verse 5, which I think is a helpful passage in thinking about how idolatry relates to us who maybe we don't build actual statues and fall down before them in worship. But in Colossians 3 and verse 5, Paul says, "Mortify therefore your members which are upon the earth, fornication, uncleanness, inordinate affection, evil concupiscence, and covetousness," which is idolatry. The problem was always fundamentally idols of the heart, and that's still the problem. The danger for us who have been called to hear and love and fear and serve the Lord was then and is now a problem of an idol pulling our heart in a different direction. Whatever we love, whatever we trust, and whatever we obey is our God. Acceptance or beauty makes us feel valued and loved. And so what we do is we devote our hearts to being accepted and being valued and being beautiful, whatever we think that definition is, so that we will receive that from our idol. We want that feeling reciprocated. Money or power gives us a sense of security and protection, so we put our trust in that. And we devote our hearts to it because we trust that if I'm in a position of power, then I can be the one to dictate the terms. Then I can be the one who makes the decisions. Then I don't have to be on the firing end. I can be the firer. I don't have to be the fired or whatever. We sacrifice for. I want to think about, when you think about what do we obey, what makes us angry and what makes us sad and what makes us happy? What produces the most visceral reactions in our emotions? Has that thing become the Lord of our hearts? You know, if it's politics, if that's the thing that makes my blood pressure rise, or that brings me great satisfaction when it goes my way, or brings me to the depths of despondency when it doesn't go my way, is that thing the Lord of my hearts? Or my ball team, or my bank account, or my relationship? When we give our love to something other than God, whose value of us is the only true measure of value, right? Doesn't matter what society thinks about us, doesn't matter what our peer group thinks about us. Ultimately, what God thinks about us is the only thing that matters. But when we do that, it's called adultery. And Jeremiah would say about the people of Israel that they had gone and they had lain with every harlotress out there because they were looking for something that they had in God. Love and value and security and direction. But they were looking for it all over the place. And they never found it. When we give our trust to something other than God, who is the only real refuge and security, it is a rejection of God as our true deliverer. And when we obey something other than God, who is the only true Lord and Redeemer, it is treason. And so in some ways, in many ways, idolatry is the fundamental sin. So let me think for just a moment. How can we work on removing idolatry? Well, first we need to identify what our idols are. What fills your empty moments? The unscheduled moments? What fills your mind? What fills that time? How do we fill those gaps? How do we spend our money? Where do we direct our resources? And then could we evaluate our emotional reactions to things? I think if we look at those areas of our life, we'll get a pretty good sense of where our idols are. I have worked on that lately, and I think I know. I'm working on it, but I think I know where they are. And then we work on replacing them. So instead of just allowing things to fill our minds, let's fill those moments intentionally with moments of devotion, with reading and with prayer and with meditation. Let's direct our resources, not just allow our resources to flow towards the idols of our heart, but direct our resources to the things we know they should be going to. Intend them to go into certain places. And our heart follows our treasure. And then, let me say about the emotional reactions. We need to embrace fully the truths of the gospel. Christ's love, His victory, His return, in order to put events, successes, and tragedies in perspective. I think that will help us if we can embrace God's love, the coming of judgment. All of these things put the things that make our emotions go up and down, they put them into perspective. All right, very quickly. Closely related to idolatry, but of a specific concern of how to avoid it, was the nations. In Deuteronomy chapter 7, so this is kind of 1b as far as my points go. That was a long first point. Deuteronomy 7, when the Lord thy God shall bring thee into the land whither thou goest to possess it, and hath cast out many nations before thee, the Hittites and the Girgashites and the Amorites and the Canaanites and the Perizzites and the Hivites and the Jebusites, 7 nations greater and mightier than thou. And when the Lord thy God shall deliver them before thee, and thou shalt smite them and utterly destroy them, thou shalt make no covenant with them, nor show mercy unto them, neither shalt thou make marriages with them. Thy daughter thou shalt not give unto his son, nor his daughter shalt thou take unto thy son, for they will turn away thy son from following me, that they may serve other gods. So will the anger of the Lord be kindled against you, and destroy you suddenly. But thus you shall deal with them. You shall destroy their altars, and break down their images, and cut down their groves, and burn their graven images with fire. All right, so when they come into the land, the nations were devoted to destruction. We've talked about this before, especially in Bible class. But the reason they were devoted to destruction was because this was God's judgment on them, because of their idolatry. In Genesis chapter 15, God tells Abraham that He's going to give his descendants this land. He says, but not yet, because their iniquity is not yet full. The cup was filling up. And once it reached the level where God was ready, then He was going to bring Israel in to judge them. So this was not Israel just deciding, well, we really like this land, and these people, they're in the way, and so we're going to wipe them. This is God's judgment on them. In Leviticus 18, God talks about the idolatry and the sexual immorality that they had been involved in, and He's warning Israel not to participate in this. He says, because it's these things, for these reasons, why I'm kicking them out of the land, why I am executing my wrath on them. And so, as a result of that, they were to completely exterminate them. No covenant, no mercy, no intermarriage. And you might say, well, why would He have to talk about intermarriage if they're supposed to be completely exterminated? Well, first of all, we know they were going to take the land little by little, that they weren't going to do it all at once, lest the land become too much for them. But also, I think there's an awareness that Israel may not follow through on their end of this. And so, if you're not going to do it all, you've got to at least draw these boundaries. But it's not about race. It was about their idolatry. Now, how do I know that? Because not all the Canaanites were killed. Think about Rahab. Rahab says, I've heard about the Lord. And my heart melted. And I want to join with you. And I don't want to be a part of this Canaanite culture anymore. Well, she is spared. And what about Israelites who engaged in idolatry? Well, they're safe because they're part of the... No. Deuteronomy 13 says if a prophet comes to you and says, let's go serve other gods, don't listen, first of all. And second of all, you kill that prophet. Because no prophet of God will ever come and say, let's go serve other gods. And what about your family? What if your husband or your wife or your children or your parents come to you and they say, I've been thinking about this and, we'd really benefit if we'd go worship these other gods. They have a lot to offer. What do you do with them? You kill them. You don't listen, first of all, and then you kill them. So it's not about race, it's about idolatry. And it's even not about race necessarily in intermarriage. Because there would be occasions, Deuteronomy 21 tells us, where Israel would go to war with nations that were not in Canaan, right, with other nations, and they may take captive people, and they were allowed to marry the women from those nations. So it's not about a racial distinction, it's about the threat of them pulling their hearts away from the Lord. The driving factor, I think we see in verse 6 of Deuteronomy 7. For thou art an holy people unto the Lord thy God. The Lord thy God hath chosen thee to be a special people unto Himself above all people that are on the face of the earth. That was why they had to do this. Because they were special. And God didn't want them being pulled away and looking just like the other nations. Is there an application for us? Well, we know we don't have the same commission to divine destruction. I was trying to think of passages in the New Testament that we would think about to say, okay, we're not supposed to go kill the idolaters. I thought about Philippians 2 verse 15, that we live in the midst of a crooked and perverse generation. I think the whole New Testament assumes that the people who surround us are going to be wicked and idolatrous. And there will be many other passages we could add to that. But if we want to avoid idolatry, it would be really unwise to tie in with the idolaters. I think about 2 Corinthians 6. It says, "Come out from among them and be ye separate." Now I think that is talking about not joining hands with people to go into their idolatry, to participate with them in the wickedness and the worldliness that they would be involved in. But I think the primary focus in Deuteronomy 7 seems to be on intermarriage. Why? Because of the incredible influence of marriage on the devotion of our hearts, the person we're married to. Would it be wise, ladies, to marry a man whose idol is money and success or lust? Not if you want to be happy, it won't. It's not wise. Not if you want to be godly, it's not wise. Is it wise to marry a woman whose idol is beauty and social standing or comfort? Would it be wise to raise children with a man whose idol is power? Would it be wise to raise children with a woman whose idol is acceptance? No. And you see people all over whose idol is acceptance. And you see how it's shaped their children. It's not a good move. Instead, even though that's not wise, many parents and young people ignore the warning signs and rush headlong into it. I know of a young lady. I grew up going to church with her. And her parents, the young man she was marrying was not a Christian. And they said, but he makes a good living. Well, now he makes a good living and they're unfaithful. So, there's that for you. If parents don't counsel their children, and if young people don't listen to that counsel, and they go ahead and rush headlong into it, if they're going to be faithful to the Lord, it's going to be constant grief. Or you'll just be pulled right along with them. Those are pretty much your options. What are your idols? What are the things that are not God that you love and trust and obey in a way that should be reserved only for Him? What Jesus would say is, if you love anything more than me, you're not worthy. And whatever it is, you've got to renounce it to follow Him. It's not that we don't love or trust or obey anything else at all, but that Christ is ultimate. And that when the decision must be made, which direction am I going to go, I already know the answer when I confess Jesus as Lord. What connections do you have that are not helping you maintain your faithfulness to the Lord, that are pulling you towards idols? How can you limit their influence on your heart? There may be some that you're married, but how can you limit the influence of that idolatry on your heart? Now, there may be somebody here this morning, we're going to sing in just a minute. There may be somebody here this morning who has never yielded obedience to the gospel of Christ. He's the King of the universe, the only rightful King of the universe. He loves you. He gave Himself for you to free you and forgive you and free you from things that cannot deliver, things that cannot profit. He can deliver. He can save you. He's the only one who can. And so give Him your obedience and your allegiance. Love Him, trust Him, and obey Him. There may be others who have made that commitment to obedience in the past. But other influence, other loves, other deliverers have made promises that you see they're not able to keep. Other masters may have taken hold of your heart. Return to Christ. Again, give Him your allegiance. If we can help you with that, we want to. Won't you come while we stand, while we sing?
Thanks for watching. If you found this video to be beneficial, Please follow us on Facebook or subscribe to our YouTube channel. Feel free to share it with others that you feel like may benefit from it. If you need to contact us, please contact us via email at quinn.church@yahoo.com. Also, if you're in the area, we would love for you to come visit with us at one of our assemblies. Have a good day.